You guys for coming tonight, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan for having this eager want to learn more about your deen, learn more about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, our Lord. Jazakumullah khairan for your hirs, for being here while it's weekend and you know for a fact that you have a lot of other plans and you chose to be around the masajid coming here for this halaqat ilm. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Say Ameen. Say Ameen. Beautiful. So, subhanallah, today is one of the most important debates. Why? Because it's basically about the existence of our Creator, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And before I introduce our beloved speaker today, and I introduce the team, inshallah, that they are, inshallah, going to debate him about the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I want to tell you all, guys, that this topic is very critical. The 13 years, the first 13 years of Bi'athat al-Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam, when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam started his da'wah, his 13 years, he was so focused on one aspect, and one aspect only, which is the oneness of God, the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And actually that wasn't just the message of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but actually that was the message of all prophets. اعبدوا الله لا شريك له. Worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the core of our religion. This is the core of our religion. And subhanallah, Prophet Muhammad did not teach his companions in these 13 years anything about zakah. He did not teach them anything about hajj. He did not address all these topics. He was so focused on the first pillar of iman, which is believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's it. Because he knows for a fact that if he can fix this, then everything will be fixed. This is the core of our religion. And subhanallah, thinking about and looking at the story of Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu, right? When his body was cooked in the hot desert of Mecca, he used to say, Ahadun Ahad. One. Why? Because actually, this is the only thing that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught him. And that was so powerful for him to sacrifice his life. Just the fact that he believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the core. This is the core of our religion, guys. And today, we're very blessed to have with us Brother Bakr Assaf. Please, guys, give him a huge round of applause. Please come here, Bakr Assaf. Jazakumullah khairan for coming. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. And we have our amazing students today. Talal, Awad, can you please come to the stage? Ahmed Hallaq, Zain, and Asil already escaped from the battle. He feared to comfort you, Bakr. Anyway, so Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. We're starting, inshallah. I want to start actually our debate today with one of the sayings of Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali. He said, there is no well-being for the hearts until there settles in them the recognition of God and His greatness, love of Him, fear of Him, hope in Him, awe of Him, reliance upon Him, until they become filled with all of that. This is the reality of monotheism and the actual meaning of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. Wallahi, that's very deep and very profound. I'll repeat it again one more time. He said, there is no well-being for the hearts until there settles in them the recognition of God and His greatness, love of Him, fear of Him, awe of Him, hope in Him, reliance upon Him, until they become filled with all of that. And this is the reality of monotheism and the actual meaning of La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah. So, this debate, how this debate works, I'll give first our beloved speaker, Bakr Assaf, 2 minutes as an opening statement. He will summarize the whole thing that he wants to discuss today, and then I'll give you the same chance. And then, inshallah, we have 6 to 7 questions that we want to address today. So they will ask the question. You have 2 minutes to answer the question. They can push back 1 time, and you will have the chance to answer their pushback. And then we will move on to the second question. And at the end, there is closed statement where you're going to summarize the whole thing that you addressed today again, and a message that you want everybody today to go home with. And you guys, you have the same chance as well. So, we're starting the first, the opening statement. Go ahead, Bakr Assaf.
But I just want to say that I'm not going to make it easy. We're going to go to the questions that I have. Wait, you're not going to rebut. We're going to go into the questions. We're going to go into the questions. I don't know what to believe.
Can you finish your opening statement?
I just finished it.
Okay.
I just finished it.
So today, we're going to start our debate with the first question. Prove to me there is a hierarchy. Yes. And you have 2 minutes. 2 minutes to be the hierarchy.
So Allah is very clear that the miracle that we believe in is the Quran. Right? And if you understand the Quran, how it came about to us,
got you.
I never needed a mic before, but
Okay, so you guys have any follow-up question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, in today's society, science and technology has allowed us to create living things. I was reading an article recently when I was on my way here, and it was basically saying that there was a cat that was created in China, genetically modified, created entirely by genes and stem cells, named Ginger. funny name for a cat. But we have science and technology, and that has allowed us to create things. So what would be the point of a higher being if we ourselves, as humans, can create?
that's a good question. If that was a creation to begin with, you took existing materials, you took existing DNA, and you photocopied it. So equivalent of saying you're a plagiarist. So essentially, I could take a book, I could go make photocopies of it, and just because I made photocopies of it, I'm going to go to my teacher and say, that's my reference, that's my book. Who would accept that? Which professor would accept that? So you created nothing. You made a photocopy.
All right. We're going to go to the second question. What is, based on your point of view, what is the relationship between science and religion?
What is the relationship between science and religion? The first thing I'll tell you is I'll bring caution about the question to begin with. Why? Because a lot of times us as Muslims, we don't reaffirm our faith until we see a scientific explanation for it. And that's dangerous. Because about 500-600 years ago, there was a lot of Muslims who left Islam. You might say, why? You know Galileo? You know what he discovered, right? He discovered that the earth was orbiting the sun. Prior to 1600s, everyone believed that everything was orbiting earth. And that worked great, because when Allah Azza wa Jal references the sun and the moon in the Quran, He says that they all have their orbit. So all of the Muslims and the entire world, they were in the belief that the sun and the moon were orbiting the earth. But Allah said that the sun is orbiting. Allah said the sun is orbiting. So a lot of Muslims said, wow, he just proved it with the invention of his telescope that the earth is orbiting the sun. The Quran is wrong. Until a couple hundred years later, with the birth of with the invention of higher telescopes and more advanced technology, we found that the sun is revolving, and it is orbiting. Allahu Akbar. Around what? Around the galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy. So if you can imagine, the earth is orbiting the sun, and while that orbit is taking place, the sun is also orbiting around the galaxy. So Allah dwarfed the smallest thing you could possibly think, and He said the sun is orbiting. But that led a lot of people to doubt their religion. So it's misunderstanding the evidence in the Quran with what we've seen through a scientific proven experiment. So I'll end with this. If there is any scientific experiment that has been proven 100%, and there's an entire process through that. If anybody studies biology or anything like that, observing and documenting and the entire thing, empirical evidence, it will never contradict the Quran. And I would challenge anyone on that side to prove me otherwise.
You have a hard job today.
Made it harder because you limited me. You limited me.
I really do feel bad for you. Okay, do you have any follow-up questions?
Yeah, so to my knowledge, I just want to point out something in his argument. If I'm not mistaken, it wasn't Galileo who came up with the heliocentric model of the universe. It was Nicholas Kepler. And Galileo confirmed it through the use of telescopes.
Yeah, because until Galileo proved it, it's a theory. So it was discovered in 1560 or something like that, and he came out with the theory that Earth was orbiting. But it wasn't proven until Galileo actually proved it with his experiment.
Right, but even in a theory, there's a great deal of proofs that you have to have in order to establish a theory to begin with.
You and I can establish a theory right now.
Well, I'm not going to establish a theory right now. I'm not a scientist.
By definition, scientist could be a profession, can be a trade, can be something, right? But we can both come up with whatever our respective fields are, and we can come up with any theory we want. It doesn't mean that it's proven. There's thousands of theories out there. Like there's a theory that anyone who's an atheist is ignorant. That could be a fact. That could be a theory. It could be. You could choose whichever way you want.
That's true.
All right. Moving on to the next question.
He told me to keep it simple.
So
no, go hard, man.
Yeah, please.
Because these guys, and as a side note, I know this is not probably part of it, but it's a real challenge that we as Muslims are sending our children into higher education without the correct foundation of Aqidah. And I mean it. So maybe this could serve as a little bit of an intro, very, very mini intro in Aqidah. And it's very important to have these before you're going to start studying these kinds of subjects.
Absolutely.
But go ahead.
So that was the concept of the whole course, Bakr.
Oh, Jazakallah khair.
Jazakumullahu khairan. We cannot make it without you guys, wallahi. We got great speakers, great teams. Everything was helping us to achieve this. I really appreciate Ahmed Sahwel. I really appreciate Munir Hamda's contribution. I really appreciate Dr. Islam al-Fayyumi's contribution. I really appreciate Akhuna Bakr Asaf's contribution. Jazakumullahu khairan for all the efforts and time that you took from your commitments. Moving on to the next question. Prove to me that the correct variation of God is Allah in Islam and not the Trinity in Christianity.
The Trinity in specific?
Yeah.
Well, the Trinity proved itself wrong, right? Because if you look at the Council of Nicaea, when Constantine brought them together and he wanted to unify the Christians and the pagans and the ones who believed in the Roman gods, what he did is there was a lot of, well, you would call them, some people would call them Christians, we would call them Muslim, believe it or not, who were upon Tawheed, who still believed in the message of Isa alayhi salam. And anybody who said that Jesus was the begotten Son, was killed. They were executed, right? And so those copies of the Bible where the word begotten wasn't printed were burned. Afterwards they came out with the agreement that, you know, the whole concept of Zeus sleeping with a mortal and then Hercules is born, that concept also exists in Roman mythology. And so they said, well, we have the same concept here where we need to unite these groups all together. So that's where the begotten Son came from. But if you look, the Oxford Press used to print a copy of the Bible where it would be read in red ink, where it was the known statements of Isa alayhi salam. The known statements, that's what they could confirm. The other stuff are collections of those disciples and some of the people who collected those books. And not a single one of those statements actually says that Isa is saying, I'm the Son of God. Not a single one of them. Which led, and I believe someone said there was statistics that thousands of Christians were converting to Islam every single year because of that. And they stopped printing that copy. You cannot buy a copy that has Jesus' quotes in red anymore. If you had it, it was a printed copy before. And like Allah Azza wa Jal mentions in the Quran, which is what we believe in, He says if there was 3 gods, who would win? Right? You look at all throughout any type of belief system where there are multiple gods, they're fighting each other. They're each fighting each other. They're jealous. This one's creating this one's, creating a fitna for this one. They're all just doing weird things because they can't agree. And then it actually removes the concept of a higher being. Now there is no creator, higher strength, one, right? Because there's multiple. It's like, well, what? You will say, well, then does the majority win? Well, what if the Spirit, the Holy Ghost, and the Son, they outnumber the Father? It's a concept that doesn't really work, honestly.
Jazakumullah khairan. Sure. Any follow-up question? Guys, I need your contribution as well. You have any other pushback?
Do you guys have anything to say? Okay, I guess I can.
So we're going to move to the next question. Oh, you have something?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, if Jesus really was the Son of God in the view of the Trinity, then wouldn't Jesus not really contradict or disapprove of what God does? You stated with Roman and Greek mythology that those gods often fight with each other. But I mean, if Jesus is the Son of God, if we were to accept the Christian, belief of the Trinity as true, then wouldn't it be possible to suggest that that Jesus would not contradict or would not disagree with God Himself if Jesus was His Son and if Jesus agrees with what God is doing? Isn't that also
a great question? Because you've never disagreed with your father, right? Ever?
Right, but I'm not. My Father isn't God. And
no.
And I'm not.
But you're supposed to be part
the Son
God.
of God. Am I supposed to be?
So
part
in the
God?
human realm, do you disagree with your father?
Yes.
So in the God realm, why wouldn't the Son disagree with the Father either? And at the same time, to show that God is part human.
Between the the human world and the godly world. And in this case, in terms of Christianity, not in terms of polytheism, how is it fair to make that connection between the human world and the Christian world with the contradictions of God?
It's a great question. The Bible itself makes the connection.
It does.
It says that He is the human flesh representing God on earth, so they make that connection. We didn't, and that's another flaw. The other one is that the fact that a human can be part God. Humans have needs. And if God is God, God shouldn't have a single need. God shouldn't eat, shouldn't get hungry, shouldn't need thirst. And we all know Jesus drank, Jesus ate, Jesus used the bathroom. You're going to associate using the bathroom with God? So, I mean, if you do, that's your belief, and in all respect to you. We'll agree to disagree.
Takbir.
Allahu Akbar.
Right, moving to the next question. How is it fair that I have an advantage for being Muslim on, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created me Muslim, and Allah would judge those who weren't created Muslim with the same way He's going to judge me. So is that fair?
That's a great question, except the question is flawed. Allah Azza wa Jal created everyone Muslim. And so when Allah Azza wa Jal created everyone, He said that we are born upon the fitrah. And some of the scholars said, if you will, this is this lowercase Islam. Right? So if anybody passes away as a human being on the face of this planet before the age of discernment, before the age of reason, call it like, I don't know, what people are maturing at, 13, 14, 15, whatever you want to call it. Before that age, if they passed away, may Allah Azza wa Jal protect us, they go to paradise. They have no count to be held against them, no bad deeds to be put against them. So they go to paradise. So the first thing to understand is that everyone is born a Muslim, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and then their parents changed them into a different religion, either Judaism, Christianity, or Majusi magistrate, or whatever other ism that's out there, atheism now, and I don't know, homoism and whatever else exists. But I could tell you right now that there's a lot of isms out there, and they're not going to stop. They're going to keep coming, right? They're going to just keep on going and going and going. And alhamdulillah, we have the Quran, which will last until the Day of Judgment, and that's never going to change. Allah Azza wa Jalla said that Himself. So the last thing I'll mention on this note is that if, for example, a person did grow older and they passed the age of discernment, where they have the ability to distinguish right from wrong, and they make choices and they're held accountable for those choices. Two things. One, we ask, has that person received the message completely of La ilaha illallah? Not necessarily completely of the rules and everything like that, but the basics of Islam, right? The 101. If the answer is yes, then they'll be held accountable for that. And they made a conscious choice to deny that, just like in atheism or Karl Marx or anyone else who wanted to say there's no such thing as Allah, or I'm choosing to believe in something else. That's number one. Number two, if they didn't, like, for example, a lot of these Native American tribes who believed in Tawheed, the Prophet ﷺ said that they fall under a group called Ahl al-Fatra, not Fitra, Fatra, meaning the people between periods. He said what happens with them on the Day of Judgment, as long as they didn't make shirk in their lifetime, and they didn't hear the message of Islam by any prophet, right? That Allah Azza wa Jal brings them on the Day of Judgment, and He sends Yursilhim Rasul. He'll send them an angel to ask of them a question, a command from Allah Azza wa Jal, and if they obey it, they would enter paradise. So their test is on the Day of Judgment. But alhamdulillah, we believe everyone is Muslim. Jazakallah khair.
But it's not fair though.
What's not fair?
They didn't get the same opportunities that we had. We grew up in a Muslim household. Our parents taught us Islam. We come here every time at the masjid. The Sheikh gives us khatiras and lectures and khutbahs about our deen, so we get better understanding of our religion, while they don't have that opportunities. How's that fair?
Are you talking about people who are consciously not believing, or people who just don't know?
People who don't know, or they were just following the religion of their parents.
Okay. So I could tell you one thing very importantly that we recognize as Muslims is that everyone in this room, it's obligated upon us to be giving da'wah, by the way. It's a shame that the people around us don't know it's because of us, right? And that could be a valid excuse for some of these people on the Day of Judgment. But in short, your entire lifetime is summarized by one statement. One statement. Sami'na wa ata'na. All of the things that you're doing is whether you heard the message and you obeyed. And that's why I even told my halaqah this, man, it was probably, a month or 2 months ago. I said the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal gave us the example telling the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that these people will be asked one question. They'll be asked one thing on the Day of Judgment. And if they listen to that one thing, they earn paradise, which you took your entire life earning. You understand that? You spent all this time in the masjid, learning, praying, fasting, giving zakah, qiyam al-layl, extra fasting. You did this all your life. And where did you wind up? In paradise. They just didn't disobey Allah. They answered one statement of Allah. They answered one request of Allah. And they also entered paradise. So where is it not fair? As a Muslim, you have a lot of hard work to do. The more you learn, the more that you can earn Allah's pleasure and you enter paradise. And your entire life is summarized by one statement. If you heard and you obeyed. Allah Azza wa Jalla told you to do this, you did it. Allah told you to do this, it's not like, well, it's not my time, I'm not ready for it. You just answer that one question. Your entire life is summed up by one question. Did you answer it? Or did you say, it's not for me right now? And that's why those non-Muslims, or those people who are asked on the Day of Judgment, they'll be asked, did your Muslim neighbor tell you about this? Did you ever see them praying? And if they seen you and you heard and you had that dialogue, then they're held accountable. Why didn't they ask further? Why didn't they look around? Because Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Quran, we were born with no intellect, and then Allah Azza wa Jalla allowed us to develop it through hearing, through seeing, through learning. Right? And that's how we wind up becoming Muslim, alhamdulillah.
Any follow-up questions, guys, to this?
So one point I want to raise
Yeah.
is that, just like how you pointed out that many Muslims are raised in a Muslim household and they're conditioned to be Muslims for the rest of their lives, thinking the Muslim ideologies. Doesn't the same go for Christians and their ideologies when they're raised by Christian parents? They're conditioned to believe all Christian ideologies from a young age, and it's very hard to change those ideologies once you get older.
So that's a good question, and I could tell you that if you look at the statistics of people entering into a religion, there's not a single, we're obviously the highest one. The amount of people entering Islam from all over the world, from all different religious backgrounds, the highest one is Islam. Show me how many Muslims are leaving Islam for Christianity, right? Their statistic is nil. It's not even there, right? Does it exist? Yeah. I met one person in my life and he left for a girl. I met another person because he used to get beat with a hose every time he made a mistake reciting Quran. He said, this religion is flawed. This is not how you live. I met another person who couldn't grasp the concept of the Prophet ﷺ marrying Aisha at that age. So she said, this can't be a religion. So you took 99% of the entire truth, and because of your misunderstanding, your inability to ask questions and better understand the religion, you left it the other way. So for the Christian who is born into a Christian household, and continues learning that way, and continues believing that, Allah Azza wa Jal gave everyone an intellect to actually question. When you read the Bible, I read the Bible cover to cover. Genesis chapter 16, where Allah wrestles with a human being, and the human defeats him. Like, these are questions that have to arise, and anybody who actually reads their book, they will recognize that it's flawed. You look at the Judaic book, they say that Allah Azza wa Jal weeps part of the night. He dedicates a part of the night every single night and he cries. Do you know why God cries? Because he regrets allowing the Temple of Solomon to fail, to be knocked down. So he's regretting. There's another part of the night every once in a while, God meets with the head of hell and he discusses matters with him. What's going on here? I mean, you see, we can all recognize this because Allah gave you an intellect. And if you're grown up in these households, if you never lifted a book or a page, this is why Allah says, Iqra. Recite and learn. Because the more you recite and learn, you'll find, go to the Quran cover to cover. The problem is we start buying all sorts of books. Little illustrations, little pamphlets. Just go to the Quran. Go to the Quran, start it cover to cover, and you'll find so much reaffirmation in your religion. And you'll find also the Christians, that's why they start challenging their own beliefs.
I can't show emotions right here because I have to be fair, but I'm in love with your speech, really.
Alhamdulillah, that's from Allah Azza wa Jalla. May Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to benefit.
I have to be fair here. I cannot show emotions.
Can I ask a question about that, though?
Yes.
So,
Go ahead. He wants to
Yes,
cut me off.
atheist, speak. I'm just kidding.
So, you can make the argument, and this could be a possibility, it's actually a truth, that we know that the Quran is the word of Allah, and it's something that we should believe and follow. So obviously we're going to defend it. Similarly, a Christian could grow up believing that their book was the right religion, and they could find out ways to defend it as well. Those things that you mentioned to be inherently flawed within Christianity, maybe you misunderstood it while reading the book. I know people who read the Quran just left Islam. So I mean, the inverse could also happen. So what do you have to say about that?
Okay, I could tell you there, in our history, there's not a single Islamic scholar from Ahl Sunnah wa Jama'ah that left Islam.
Okay.
However, how many scholars of Christianity left Christianity? Gerald Dirks, the head of the Harvard missionary, right? Christian missionary, left Islam and then left Christianity, converts to Islam, and writes an entire book on the cross and the crescent on how entire Christianity is flawed. And actually, Isa's message was no different than Muhammad's. They just changed the message. How many Muslims, give me a Muslim scholar, not somebody who graduated with their bachelor's in Islamic studies from some 4-year school here, somebody who actually learned from Muslim scholars, right? And they learned that aqidah and went to a higher level of education, and they, right, straight orthodox, and they left Islam. Name one if you don't mind.
I don't have an example.
Okay,
But,
well I named you
couldn't
one.
you say that it falls into the realm of possibility?
What?
Couldn't you say that it also falls into the realm of possibility that some scholar would leave Islam? What if they weren't leaving Islam because, let's say, and I don't have an understanding of Islamic history, so chances are I'm going to throw out something out there that's wrong. But let's say that we had a tyrannical Islamic government that forced people to become Muslim, even scholars. And because of fear, scholars stayed as Muslim. Isn't that also a possibility?
Everything's possible, right? Allah Azza wa Jal gave you an intellect and said anything is possible. And alhamdulillah, even though these are possibilities, the Quran still didn't change at the end of the day. And since the original question was, isn't that my misunderstanding of the Quran, we had biblical scholars quote that understanding, reference that understanding. And then I went to church for 6 months, okay, and the deacon closed the book in my face, his book, right, King James copy. He closed it and he said, my son, he said, right now we believe in faith. He said, this is the error of man. He said that to me when I showed him, can you explain to me how a human being could defeat God? And so I didn't understand it wrong. It's clear as day, right? You open different versions. There is a modern version that says an angel wrestled with God and defeated him, as if that makes it better. I was like, well, it's an angel, guys. Well, he's still a creation. I don't know. I don't know if somebody thought this was the wisest thing to do, right? That we'll change it to an angel. We'll make it sound better. I don't know, right? And that's just very weird.
All right, so moving, Jazakallah khair, Barakallah Asaf. Moving on to the next question. If God is real, why did he give us no solid evidence that he exists? Why did he not just reveal himself to all of us?
So God is real, alhamdulillah, and we believe that. And he did show his existence through the different things around us. And he mentions it in the Quran in different occasions. He says, for example, he mentions if you look at the universe itself, the origin of the universe, he first of all, I want to make a statement just so that we all understand why Islam is a religion, right, and not a scientific experiment. Because the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal gave us the proof of the Quran, and the proof through, for example, our environment around us, the universe, the origin of the universe, the creation of the human embryonic cycle, you know that, right? In the Quran, in Surah Al-Mu'minun. And if you look at this, right, then it leaves you no other choice but to say that Allah Azza wa Jal is the creator. If Allah revealed himself to us, then what's the test? What's the test? Allah Azza wa Jal revealed himself. And he's so magnificent, 100% of the people are going to be believers. Allah said that in the Quran. There's two types of yaqeen. You either have yaqeen of the dunya, which is certainty, affirmation, or you have yaqeen in the akhirah. You don't want that one. Because on the day of judgment, Allah said everyone's a believer, but it's too late. Because you see the magnificence of Allah. You see Allah. You see what's going on. You see the day of judgment. You see the sun being brought forth. You see the flat plane. You see everyone resurrected naked. You see some people with their private parts on their faces. You see some people drowning in their own sweat. You see some people being tortured left and right, their lips being ripped apart, their faces, their people being tortured. You see, everyone's a believer on that day. But Allah just said, this is the test. And we all took the covenant. We all, as human beings, the human race, took a covenant that we accept Allah as our Lord. We accept Allah as our Lord, the only Lord that we're going to worship. And we will, sami'na wa ata'na, we will listen to the message and we will obey. Somebody might say, well, I don't remember that. I don't remember taking that covenant. Well, then I'll ask you, when you were 2 and 3 years old, do you remember everything you did? But you were 2 and you were 3 once. And if your parents told you, no, I raised you, you did that, it was nasty and you did it, and we taught you out of it. It was a bad habit. You used to do that, but you don't remember it. But you'll believe me, you were 2 or 3 at one point, and Allah Azza wa Jalla is telling you, were you there? Did you witness your own creation when Allah created you? No. You didn't witness your own creation, but you're here, and Allah's telling you when He created you, and your souls were all scattered in that realm, that He took a covenant, that you all took a covenant with Allah, and you promised Him that you will listen and obey the message when it reaches you. And may Allah Azza wa Jalla allow us to continue that until the day of judgment.
Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen. Any follow-up question, guys?
So you answered the question, why did God just not reveal Himself? And you said because it's a test, right? But what's the whole point of it being a test, you know? Allah, I mean, based off of what I know, I'm not 100% sure, but
It's okay.
Allah created humans because He wanted to be known. That's like the main reason He created humans. So why didn't He just like make us all know Him? I get what you say, that there might be some evidence in the Quran, but why didn't He just show Himself to us? There's a test, but what's the point of the test? Why not just like make all humans Muslims?
Excellent question. Give him a round of applause. Got a lot of guts coming up there. So Allah Azza wa Jalla didn't create us so we know Him. Allah created us so we worship Him. Allah Azza wa Jalla said in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Right? Allah said in the Quran, He didn't create the humankind, the jinn kind and the humankind except to worship Allah. And here's a very important thing. As a human being of intellect, it will humble you to know that there is a creator and you are created. Right? And I want to just put this into perspective. Allah Azza wa Jalla gave us intellect to create and invent things. And even something as simple as your own iPhone. Your own iPhone. When it doesn't work anymore, if every time you hit call, it turns off. Every time you send a text message, it deletes it. It just absolutely haywire. It doesn't do anything you command it to do. Are you going to keep the phone or you're not going to keep it? You're going to toss it away. It's useless. It's useless. You don't care about it anymore. But you have this, you created this for a purpose, right? And it's not serving that purpose, it has no value. And Allah Azza wa Jalla created us for a purpose. And if we're not serving that purpose, we have no value with Allah. We're of no use. We're nothing. And that's the reason that Allah Azza wa Jalla says, even in His mercy, in all of His mercy, He's willing to forgive 99% of everything, except shirk. Just don't die upon shirk. Somebody said, well, this guy used to fornicate, used to drink alcohol. We're not promoting that stuff, but did he die on shirk? No, he didn't. He died a Muslim. You see? You see how much rahmah Allah Azza wa Jal has? So Allah Azza wa Jal created us to get to know Him through the ubudiyyah, through worshiping Allah. And if you do that, you'll find, and this is what I'll tell you, never forget this, if you do that, you'll find that you're a kind person. You're a person who doesn't curse. You're with upright character. You're a person that respects and helps others. Right? This is the person who is behind the source of Islam. But you look at the opposite, you look at somebody like Karl Marx, who was the first to publicly say he's atheist. This psychopath was actually in love with his own sister, to the extent that he killed himself. Right? So people don't even realize, these people who come up with these ideas, do some background checks on them, and you'll find that they're all insane. And I even challenged a college student in Long Island, in Brooklyn, Long Island University, and I even told him this. And you know what his response was? I said, I would be comfortable knowing that I'm following a man who brought this religion with upright character, who the religion was revealed to him, and he passed it on to us. Upright character, honest, truthful, helpful, right? All of these things. And the entire world spoke amazing things about him versus somebody like that. He said, yeah, but that's the genius of it. He's insane. That's what his response was. That he's confident and happy to follow and a human being who was insane and loved his own sister and wanted to have incestation with her. May Allah protect us.
We got a question from the audience. Adam, do you have a question?
Yeah.
Can you repeat the question again, Bakr? We didn't hear it.
Say the question again. Yeah. So if Allah is who He is, wouldn't He know the position everybody's going to be in on the Day of Judgment? The answer is yes, right? And that is part of al-qadar wal-qada. That's very, very important. Another aspect of aqeedah we have to understand, which is predestination. There's different types of ilm. I want you to never forget that. And we are of the lowest kind. You might think yourself so high in PhD and everything, but we are of the lowest kind. There's a lot of ilm. There's the ilm of Allah, which no one knows. This ilm is only with Allah. Then there is some ilm that Allah has given to the malaika, the angels, and they carry out certain things, right? Like when a person will die, the rizq of a person, things like that. And some scholars even went further to say that all of the exact fixed elements of earth, like gravity being 9.8 millimeters per second, this, all of these different weights and these different elements around the world, that there's an angel assigned to every one of them. Allahu A'lam. But we do have some evidence leading towards that with the angel of Mika'il. So it's for us. It's for our benefit. Allah knows whether we're going to hell or heaven, but you don't. And that's the purpose of your creation. That is the purpose of us being created, to determine whether we decided to follow our Creator, humble ourselves, to thank Allah that we have been created. Some people went into an entire philosophical discussion to say, well, we have to thank Allah so much, the fact that He created us to begin with. We could have just been nothing. We could just not be on earth, and then what are you? Nothing. You just can't grasp the concept of nothingness. And then that's where you hear these psychopaths starting to say, I think, therefore I am, and all this other weird stuff. Alhamdulillah, you look in the mirror, you see yourself, you are who you are, right? You know what's going down that day. But I could tell you that all of this is a test for you, right? Allah knows everything. He knows the past, present, and future. He knows everything. But it's for you to humble yourself to say, I don't know the knowledge of Allah. So I'm going to do my part. I'm going to try really hard, and if I mess up, I'm going to ask Allah to forgive me, and He will forgive you. 100% He will forgive you, and you keep on living that all the way until the day that you meet Allah.
Okay, one more question from the team, and then I'll get back to you, Umar, inshallah. So you just mentioned, Bakr, you associated morality and religion. And here's my pushback. Why do I need a religion to be moral? I can be moral without a religion.
That's a great question. You could look at our very own country and see that you need religion for morality, right? You need religion for morality. The concept of separating church and state, the secularist belief, is also a religion. Secularism is a belief that a man-made law governed by the people is better than a law that Allah Azza wa Jal ordained for us, or a higher power. And the moment, if you look throughout our country here, in the last 100 years or so, the more that we moved away from the Christian foundations, this country was founded on a lot of Christian beliefs. If anybody doesn't know that,
this country was founded on secular days, not necessarily.
That is the most ignorant statement on this planet.
No, it's not the
Yes, it is. I mean, you could look all throughout, the death penalty, everything, stealing. Right now, for example, I'll show you. For example, only in this very country, up until 40 or some years ago, you were actually not even allowed to divorce your own wife. In the Christian Bible, divorce is a sin, and you couldn't do it. So the judge could only divorce you. You couldn't even divorce your own wife because that's a Christian principle.
But I'm not saying that this country. You're saying that this country was founded on Christian principles.
Christian beliefs, yes,
it was
absolutely.
Not founded technically by Christian beliefs. Maybe the vast majority of the population believed in those Christian beliefs. But when you're looking at the founding fathers, they're majority secular deists. Like, look at Thomas Jefferson. He wrote the Jeffersonian Bible, which is basically taking out all of the scientific miracles and just leaving the story of Jesus the way it, quote unquote, was.
Yeah, so I'm not going to debate whether they were the religion of the founding fathers. What I'm going to tell you is the laws that we have in this country are based on Christian laws, a lot of them. And so when you look at that, you look at how this country, because of its morale, and and a lot of the things that you'll find in Christianity and Judaism, you'll find that there is some similarity between those religions and Islam. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he said that there was nur from those books, but the people corrupted them, and so there is still some nur from them. You'll still find some benefits from them. You'll still find benefit. And because of that, the more that you become secularist, the more that you say that my own laws, governed by the people, the majority of what we agree upon, will be moral, then look around you. Look around you. Right now, homosexuality is the norm. It's in every single show that you could watch, every single movie that comes out of Hollywood. right? Homosexuality is the norm. Transvestites and these people who are changing their sex is another thing, right? That's now becoming very popular. Bestiality is now a norm. You may not realize it, but in the Midwest states, the police are arresting people left and right for having relations with their dog. This is going on, right? And now you have even organizations like the pedophiles all got together. The pedophiles all got together and they said, well, since this is a freedom to do whatever you want, who are you to define, what is this?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but is it really fair to say that that's a norm? I mean, if you were to look at the majority of the vast majority of Americans, or in this culture, they would consider these things to be taboo.
Okay, so let me take that statement back. Not that it's a norm, now it's common law. Now it becomes law. Now it becomes apparent for anybody who wants to exert that. The federal government allowed for same-sex marriage. The federal government allows you to check a box other, right? If you change...
bestiality,
Oh yeah, bestiality is starting to become very, very popular now.
But is it in law? Because you were saying
it will be. My point is Allah Azza wa Jal showed us in the Quran these steps that will take. Immorality doesn't stop at same-sex marriages. Immorality won't stop at changing from a guy to a girl. Immorality won't stop, and you'll look at the hadith of Sulaiman with a person sleeping with their pets. Immorality won't stop at a person sexually harassing a child, because to them that's normal. What they said in their proposal to the federal government is that if the child consented, they shouldn't go to jail.
Bakr,
this is the new morality of secularism. This is the byproduct of it.
I had a conversation with my soccer coach about this, right? I want to ask you this question because I'm talking on behalf of everyone who has the same question.
Yeah.
He said, okay, so the statistics show that religion plays a big role in morality, but me as an individual, I have control over my actions. So from my perspective, I can be an atheist and still have morality and have control over that, my own actions. I'm not talking about the countries and the statistics and whatnot. I'm talking about myself. As an individual, I don't believe in God and I still be moral.
Yeah, because his definition of moral is his definition of moral. You see, as Muslims, we don't define moral on our own, we define it from the Quran. So if Allah Azza wa Jal tells you that you dress a certain way, this is moral. That's how we define moral. But someone who is an atheist may say, well, she's dressed fine. She's moral. What's wrong with that? So the definition in of itself, this is a concept called metaphysics. If you look this up and you study it in college, it's the definition of the word itself and how you define it. So I could tell you right now that moral, it's got a wide range depending on who you ask. Us as Muslims, we reference the Quran and Sunnah. That's how we define moral.
Jazakallah khair. Beautiful.
I think that there is some underlying objective morality, though. You know, universally, if you were to abstain, like if you were to compare all cultures, if you were to shoot someone in the head, like most people would produce a visceral reaction unless they were conditioned by certain scenarios to lessen that reaction. I think that there is an underlying morality, and if I'm not mistaken, there are psychological studies that confirm it.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, you're confirming the Quran. That's called fitrah. All the scholars wrote about it. Okay. That by default, if you told a person to save another life, they'll do it. If you told the person that if she was dressed naked in front of people, may Allah protect us, they would call this immoral. These are things that are built into the human psyche that Allah Azza wa Jal created, and this is called the fitrah. So all those studies are only confirming what we already know.
Can I ask a question?
So can we just get a question from the audience, and I'll get back to you, inshallah. Omar, you still have the question, or he answered your question?
If Allah knows all of the bad deeds and the good deeds you're going to do, why are the angels still writing them down? So here's the interesting thing. Some of the scholars said, because it's an account for you. Because just like you can't even remember what you did when you were 1 and 2 and 3 years old, when Allah Azza wa Jalla is going to hold you accountable on the Day of Judgment, and you hold that kitab in your hand, لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة, that it's not going to omit anything big or even small. Nothing. It's going to be completely in there. And Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, he said, even your sucking of your teeth, or huffing and puffing to your parents, any of that, he said, even that is recorded. And why? It's two things. One, to honor you, and one, to humble you. To honor you, to let you know that Allah created angels for you in specific to document. I mean, I want you to imagine this. Someone very important throughout life, right? somebody very important throughout history, there's always people writing about them. There's always people documenting. Oh my God, Martin Luther King did this. They wrote an entire book about that chapter. Here's this chapter. Here's this chapter. Everybody's writing. Imagine you had two creations around you constantly writing. It's to honor you. It's almost like your fan base here. They're all writing every single thing you're doing, right? And then the other thing is to allow you to recollect everything you've done. Everything you've done. And then you see that, yep, I did that. I did that. I did that. So all of it is only for you, to benefit you. And it'll either be a witness for you or a witness against you, like the Prophet ﷺ said. And you get to make that choice.
Jazakallah khair. One more question from the audience. I'll go back to, inshallah, to the team. Zaid?
So he said, for a Muslim, we believe that the Quran is the truth and is a miracle. But for a non-Muslim, how do we show them that the Quran is the truth and prove to them what we believe, right? Well, I could tell you I wasn't always like this. I wasn't always of this belief and this firm on the religion and knowing this amount of information, alhamdulillah. But I could tell you what changed me was studying with an atheist professor. Studying with an atheist professor, I'll never forget this. Some people who are close to me know this. And like anything else, I was an engineering student, and I understood mathematics and physics, right? This is what you're taught. And that alone allowed me to know that there are certain things that you just can't make up, right? There are certain things that are just absolutely impossible to know. And when I was taking a course called Religion and Culture, to differentiate between certain religions that are enacting upon an action, versus is that a religious-based thing or is it a cultural-based thing? And I was studying, and my research paper was hijab in the Quran. Is hijab a cultural thing or is it an actual commandment from Allah and the Prophet ﷺ? And long story short, while I was doing that research, I came across this book, and I like to show it to everyone. It's usually available in the ICPC bookstore. It's called A Brief Illustrated Guide to Understanding Islam. And I could tell you, I wasn't a practicing Muslim at all. And alhamdulillah, Allah saved me. I came across these images, right? The embryonic life cycle in the Quran. And for a moment, I was shocked. I looked at this book. I said, is this a fake book? And I'm just going back and forth. And then I find out that, the guy who came out with, who invented, or not invented, discovered, the embryonic life cycle, he actually accepted Islam. And obviously after he accepted Islam, he rewrote his book to mention the stages that Allah mentions in the Quran, like the alaqa and the mudgha. And when he rewrote his book to include them, he was asked, why did you change the name? He said, because I couldn't find a better description of these stages in the embryonic life cycle like what's mentioned in the Quran. Because I couldn't find a better description. So I rewrote the stages based on that. Right? And obviously it was used to be a required book for medical students. Now it's, I don't even know, I asked the medical students, not even on the recommended list. And that's what, alhamdulillah, got me to Islam, because it showed me
get back to the team, inshallah. We have, Jazakallah khair, Bakr. We have a lot of questions from the audience, but I'll get back to the team first. Their last question. Why God doesn't always help me or answer my dua when I am in a status of need. He is not always for me. He's not always there for me.
So that's contrary to what we're taught. Allah Azza wa Jal said in Surah Al-Hadid, وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. So number one, Allah Azza wa Jal is always by your side. Never forget that. That's number one. Number two, Allah answers your dua 100% of the time. I want you to never forget this, by the way. Allah answers your dua 100% of the time.
How?
Either, one, He gives it to you immediately and as you asked. So for example, you said, oh Allah, give me a full scholarship to Princeton, right? Whatever. He winds up getting it for you. Alhamdulillah, you get a full ride. Or, number two, Allah Azza wa Jal will delay it and give you something better. He'll delay it and give you something better. So maybe you were hoping for a full ride and acceptance from, I'm just giving your example, your age range here, for a particular college, and then He actually gave you the full ride to an Ivy League or something like that, for example. So something better. And He may delay it to a different time, that is a time that is better for you in your lifetime. And then number three, He answers it, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh.
I'll just interrupt for a second.
Yeah.
A message from Sheikhna, Sheikh Qutnani. Can you please come? Please come. Sheikhna. It's
So
always great.
the third way Allah Azza wa Jal will answer your dua, and this is the best way. The best way. He'll answer for you on the day of judgment. Because the Prophet ﷺ, he told us, he said that a man will come on the day of judgment and they will see things, rewards, all across. And they know they don't deserve these rewards. They know they didn't do all of these things for these rewards. So they ask Allah. They say, oh Allah, where did all this come from? Where did all this come from? So Allah Azza wa Jal says that you asked me for so and so in the dunya. And I found it better for you to save it for you now, in the akhirah, in a time that your things will never expire. Do you know what the response was by this person? They say, oh Allah, I wish that you withheld everything from me in the dunya. I wish you withheld all of my dua in the dunya. Because they see what all of this became. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is answering your dua 100% of the time. Never forget that. So before you come to a Sheikh or an Imam and you say, oh please make dua for me, you make dua yourself. Go pray 2 rak'at, and in your sujood, just talk to Allah. Any language you like. Talk to Allah. And that's when you see that you'll cry. And that's when you see that you develop that relationship with Allah, and then it'll actually make you content. It'll make you recognize that you're aiming for something so much better. The problem that we have in America is, and I'll end with this, is instant gratification. You're taught that if you get on the honor roll, you get immediately a gift. You're taught if that you take the garbage out, you get a reward. You're rewarded immediately for the good things that you do, and this is not the Islamic way. The Islamic way is that you do good things because Allah wants you to do good things. And your reward is later on with Allah. And if by some chance you get some good rewards in the dunya, that's a blessing, alhamdulillah. But we want everything now. We're the now people. Your iPhone stops working? Oh my God, I gotta go to the Apple store now. You'll wait online for 3 hours, but I gotta get it fixed. You're the now people. You can't live without anything. This is not good. This is not good. This is very bad, and we have to be people who recognize that our reward is with Allah Azza wa Jal. May Allah Azza wa Jal reward us, Ya Rabbi.
Jazakumullah khairan. Of course, it's recommended to make dua for yourself, and you still can ask others to make dua for you, inshallah. And Hadith Nabi alayhi salatu salam, when he said, Allah won't accept the dua if you are being hasty. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the companions asked Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam what hasty means. And Prophet said, hasty who is someone who makes dua, Allah doesn't respond, so he gets frustrated and he stops making dua. So we have to be insistent in our dua until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers it, or he holds it for better, inshallah, on the day of judgment. Beautiful. He got, okay, that's your last question for today.
So, from our point of view, that Allah does not exist, or like a God does not exist, like, you know, our point of view, wouldn't it just be that, couldn't you think of that as just an excuse for when Allah doesn't answer you? You could just, or a God doesn't answer you, that's just an excuse. So like, let's say when Allah does answer, when what you prayed for does happen, you could just say, oh, that was Allah. And when it doesn't happen, which is, you're kind of relying on chance. But when it doesn't happen, you have an excuse for that. So like, oh, Allah's saving it for me later. So couldn't that, like, that's not really evidence of existence, because that's just like chance, you know? That's just, if it happens, oh, then this is what happened. If it doesn't happen, this will happen. So there's no like proof of a God's existence in that.
That's a good question, and the answer to that is the concept of us always wanting to be in control, right? It's more of a psychological argument than it is a evidence-based argument. And I'll give you an example. The fact that you put your seatbelt on and you drove the speed limit, you shouldn't get into an accident, but you did. There's certain things that you don't have control over, even though you did everything you were supposed to do, right? But these accidents and these things happen, and sometimes they're good for you, sometimes they're bad for you. The entire concept of proving that Allah exists, we're not proving that Allah exists or doesn't exist with dua, and we can show that all throughout. We're proving Allah Azza wa Jalla exists through the Quran. And when you see the evidence in the Quran, so many examples, then the rest is very easy. And then I would challenge the three of you to prove to me that God doesn't exist. And you couldn't ever do that. You actually couldn't even prove the opposite. But I could definitely prove that God does exist, but you will never in your life prove that God does not exist. And even the atheist himself, Karl Marx said it. He said, I know that I can't prove it, but at least I believe in something better than this thing that everyone else is following. And it will remain a theory until the day of judgment, like every scientist has said.
Beautiful. All right, so last question from the audience and then closing statement here, closing statement here, and we'll wrap up this session, insha'Allah ta'ala. Last question. Your name?
Yeah, so his question was, how does somebody with mental illnesses or like a serial killer or something like that, how does that they had an illness that they didn't have control over what they were doing? So the first thing we will say is that Allah Azza wa Jal doesn't hold anyone accountable who doesn't have mental capacity. But the fact that somebody was able to purchase a weapon, congregate a plan, come up with a plan, a scheme, and execute or shoot individuals, they have consciousness. In the Islamic definition, I'm not talking about a psychological or a medical definition of their illness and whether they're pleading insanity or not. In front of Allah, this person will be held accountable, right? They had the ability. Versus you handed a weapon to a person that is insane and they just didn't know what they were doing, they just shot the gun accidentally. You know, the entire world can view this person that they don't have intellect, they don't even know what they're doing. May Allah Azza wa Jal protect us and give sabr to any of the families who have an individual like that in their family. You see, so the Islamic definition of intellect or discernment, right, is different than what a medical definition might be. So for us, if this person had the ability to know to buy a gun, to fire a gun, to kill people, to do all of these things, this is an act of terrorism. This is by definition in Islam, this is an act of terrorism, right? And this person, if it was a Muslim country, they would actually face the death penalty.
Jazakumullah khairan. Closing statement here first, Talal. You want him to go first? Okay, Bakr Asaf. They're putting you in the hot seat.
Okay, no problem. May Allah Azza wa Jal accept from all of us, Ya Rab. The only thing I could say is that may Allah Azza wa Jal allow us to continue learning from His sake, for His sake. Just like a business person, when they're entering the business market, for them to deal in riba and in gharar and gambling and alcohol and pork, and then say, oh, I didn't know, everyone knows that's ignorant. If you're going to deal in business dealings and financial dealings, you have to study what's Islamically allowed and not allowed. And all of you who are entering college, if you're going to take a class on philosophy, on biology, evolution, right, atheism, then how can you possibly throw yourself into that water, the deep end, and you don't even know the basics of Islam? You have to study the Islamic Aqidah before you take these classes. This is my best advice. It's advice from my own teacher, Dr. Yasir Qadi, and I'll tell you the same thing to all of you. A lot of Muslims, it's not that Islam doesn't have the answer, all right? The reason that this country, a lot of it is shifting towards atheism is because Christianity doesn't have the answer. I'm serious. They don't have the answers for what the Quran has provided for us. And because of that, people are leaving the religion. I will tell you that you must pick up books about Islam. And one of the easiest ones that you can read is written by a scholar named Dr. Umar al-Ashqar, rahimahullah, and it's called Belief in Allah. It's an 8-book series. It's very easy for anyone in this room to read. It's 8 volumes, but the first volume is about Allah. You must read that book. I'm telling you, if you're entering one of these classes, you have to read that book. You have to equip yourself with enough information before you get into that and ruin your entire life. That is more important than any of your physical or financial needs. Wallahu ta'ala alam.
Jazakallah khairan, Bakr Asaf. Your closing statement, guys?
Yeah. So I hope that this dismantled the doubts that the youth have about the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Islam means to surrender to Allah by definition. And I just want to reverberate or echo something that he also said. I'm about to go to college and I want to study linguistics, which is in the liberal arts category. I'm going to be met with professors that adhere to philosophies and beliefs that are entirely different than mine. And if I don't have the basic knowledge to confront those philosophies, then my faith very well may drown. And I mean, I'm not the exception. Everyone here is going to be faced with that same burden, that same task. So what I really recommend, and the only thing that I can say, is that if you really want to protect yourself from this, first of all, you submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then second of all, you study the deen in its entirety. That's all I have to say, and that's what I want to end off.
Converted, alhamdulillah.
Jazakumullah khairan all for coming tonight. Please confirm your attendance first. And the second thing, we have photo session today, and I want 20 students, 10 from the boys, 10 from the girls, inshallah, to go upstairs to the room. And with that being said, I really want to. It's my pleasure to be around my Sheikh and my Imam and my teacher, my father, Sheikh Qutnani. He's the president of Manara Institute and the senior Imam of ICPC.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum. First of all, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Give yourself a round of applause, please. Jazakumullah khair. And Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, thank you very much for Brother Yusuf for this great job. As you heard, in every salah, we have to say, Ihdina as-sirat al-mustaqim. In every rak'ah, we have to say, Oh Allah, guide us to the straight path. What does it mean? How we will be guided? There is no any guidance for any person without two resources. The first resource is al-aql and the naql. We have al-aql means you have to use your mind. Second, you have to listen to the prophets and the messengers. We call it al-wahy, revelation. If you take one of these two resources without combine between the two resources, you can't be guided. In the judgment day, the people will say, وَقَالُوا لَوْ كُنَّا نَسْمَعُ أَوْ نَعْقِلُ مَا كُنَّا فِي أَصْحَابِ السَّعِيرِ. If we listen, if we listened, if we heard the message, if we used our minds and our brains, we will not be in the hellfire. So we have to use these two resources, which are the main resources of guidance and knowledge. Most of people, they have one resource, only their minds or others' minds. So then it never having guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless Muslim Ummah with the best resource, which is the Quran and the Sunnah. The resource from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the seal of all prophets and the messengers. My advice to my brothers and sisters, as you heard before, it is very important to read the Quran, understand the Quran, learn the Quran, ask about the Quran. Because the Quran will make you using your mind and your knowledge, your intellect. If you think that, like unfortunately many of people who don't want to listen to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they will live miserable life. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. If you turn away from the Quran, you will live very miserable life. And this is what we see in most of countries, most of families, most of individuals. We have a lot of problems, as you see, individually and collectively. Thus, you are here ambassadors for righteousness, for guidance, not only for yourselves, but for others. Allah blessed you with knowledge. Take this knowledge for others, for your brothers and sisters, for your family members, for your friends, everywhere. They need that. They need you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed you with the start and the beginning. Continue. Because we say every time, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Oh Allah, increase me with knowledge. And the difference between Islam and other faiths or other ideas that Islam combined between science and revelation. But others, they take either this or that. Islam provides us with knowledge from the science and from what? From the revelation. May Allah SWT bless you all. We thank you very much for your work hard to continue seeking and increasing your knowledge. طيب جزاكم الله خير وبارك الله فيكم. We want you, who can, inshallah, I hope that all of you, to be upstairs for a few minutes to take some pictures for inshallah, just maybe 5 minutes. We want to take these pictures as advertisement for mass convention. So we want you all, please come there, just to sit down on the chairs to start, inshallah, 5 minutes. I want to give only one message, very important message, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair, wa thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.